I know it's been a lot since I last uploaded, but here I have an update on sloc and what the plans will be for future versions. Back in the day, it was a long time ago, I talked with Michal, the developer of MapEditorReborn, to create a plan on merging sloc and MER together, because it wouldn't really be ideal to have two essentially competing tools, one for Northwood API and Exiled, and one that only supports Exiled. MER has a lot more features compared to sloc, but sloc also works on Northwood API. Northwood plugin API is, I gotta say, absolute dog shit. You can do some things with the events, but any models, like player, some are just unusable, some are not implemented or improperly implemented, and it's just a mess to work with. It's not a great developer experience. But now, Lab API is in the works, an actual proper plugin framework made by Northwood. It's getting closer to release. They said, supposedly, when it's close to being released, they will make it open source so plugin devs can provide suggestions, and they would make some changes to better fit everyone. Side note, seriously, props to Northwood for notifying us about these changes, what's actually happening. We don't get much insight into it, but at least they've acknowledged the problem that Northwood plugin API has, that it hasn't been focused on properly. And for Lab API, they have an actual team set up, so they know what they're doing. I really hope that it's going to turn out great. At first, they want to create it as they plan to make it, and I can see why. They don't want to have others influence the project or like criticize it. They have their roadmap, and then that's gonna happen, and later they will change it. This is actually going to be documented, which is crazy because most of the API's documentation is it's non-existent. You gotta figure it out yourself by either looking into the game code if you want to work with a bit more advanced things, or you look at others' plugins and then see what they've done, how they've done it. With the release of Lab API, merging MER and sloc might become a thing. Exiled is based on Northwood API because you no longer have to patch the actual game with an external tool in order to load your plugin framework. It can just be put on top of Northwood API, and it just works. I suppose that it's going to be a similar experience with Lab API. So Exiled is just going to load their own plugin loader as a plugin, if that makes sense. I'll talk about merging the two projects with Michal and some other MER devs. And of course, there are going to be some challenges. First off, I have no clue how the MER API works. I have never used that plugin. I don't know how the code looks like. Am I stupid? Yes, we would have to aim for maximum support. So people who are using the old MER or the old sloc can seamlessly transition over to the new version without any difficulties, any compatibility issues, right? And that's going to be a big challenge because sloc is a completely different thing, essentially, in terms of code. So we're gonna have to make these two somehow compatible with each other, or at least one with the other so you can port your things over. And I was thinking of creating an official tool to convert sloc files into MER schematics, but there's gonna be some issues, mainly with trigger actions, like how trigger actions work in sloc. I assume it's different in MER, so we're gonna have to make those compatible, which is gonna be one heck of a challenge. And people who use the sloc API, like the plugin, to spawn their custom things and add some other trigger actions, work with the sloc API, those are gonna have to somehow move over to MER, this combined version. It wouldn't really be ideal to have the same thing cloned twice. So like we would have the sloc features and the MER features side by side. And we would have to make a lot of changes to make that happen. It's gonna take a lot of time, not days, not weeks, months. But first off, we'll have to have Northwood release Lab API or have it be a pre-release at first. I will continue to support sloc by itself in future game versions, not for the entirety of the game, of course, but for a few more updates. So if Lab API comes out, I will port that over so it's compatible with Northwood plugin API, Lab API and exiled. Although I don't actually support exiled, I just assume it works as SLOC has an exiled version. If it works, it works. I tested on Northwood API and nothing else. I don't care about your exiled, okay? The Northwood plugin API SLOC can be loaded in exiled. Then what do you gotta worry about? Merging SLOC with MER is gonna be a tough challenge if we decide on doing it. But if it is gonna happen, then I'll make sure that it's a really powerful tool. MER is powerful by itself, but it's gonna be even easier. SLOC, just put the cube in, put the light in, and then boom, you have real objects. With MER, you gotta put the prefabs in. Some of you don't want that. Just want the core functionality of being able to export cubes and planes and capsules into a file that can be loaded somehow in SL. You don't really care how it works as long as it works and it's easy to use. When is that gonna happen? Really good question. I don't know when it's gonna happen. When Lab API comes out, I will talk to the MER devs about how exactly we would perform this merge and combine the features kind of so we could support mostly everyone's creations. So that's an update on SLOC. Version 6 is probably not gonna happen. I was planning on adding items and like structure data. You could put card permissions on doors. I just had so many things going on that I didn't even get started on it. SLOC X MER. I don't know when it's gonna happen, but if it is, I will update you guys. And thank you for watching.